My story starts in 2012 in Christchurch, about a year after the February quake, the big one, and I was in hospital, but not a real hospital. This one is held together with string and it's made of cardboard. It's part of a design project, and the intention was to build New Zealand's first patient-centred hospital. There was a lot of prototyping and a lot of mocking up at full scale in a large warehouse, and a lot of trial and error, and a lot of decisions that needed to be made. And a lot of respect for the lives who are going to live and work with those decisions. And one of the big ones was the actual ward itself. The three options that were being sort of debated was this one on the left, where the patients are in their own room, and this one on the right here, which is a multiple bed ward. And then there was this kind of hybrid where the ward could transform between open and closed. So what was missing from this decision was the patient, and how would they experience that, or each of those options. Because there's a lot of operational and clinical and even economic reasons to go with one over the other, or a certain ratio of those rooms. But the question remained, what was it like to be a patient alone or together with other patients? And I'd ask you all to have a think about, if you were given the option, if you were admitted to hospital and you knew you were going to be in there for a few days, whether you would choose to have your own room or to be in with others. And I'll talk you through a bit later about what we found about this. So the reason I'm talking about this particular project is that it was one of quite a few turning points in my work around the way that I communicate what we find. And this particular turning point came from the client. They said to me, look, Nick, actually, we don't want a report on this project. Can you just give us the video and the big visual like you did last time? And that's enough for us, because that's what generates the conversation which leads to decisions. And this was really new to me, to be told to hold the mayo, more or less, no report thanks. So I didn't have to be told twice, and off I went. So this was the most recent of a few steps from being a generator of reports to more of a visual sharer and communicator of information. So I'll talk you through a few of those steps, and how what I do now is a bit of a hybrid of a couple of sort of conflicting communication styles from previous careers, and I'll walk you step by step through my process. I'm going to take you back 10 years to when I was working in website usability, which looked like this. And then not much later, usually looked something like this. So these kinds of outputs gave the clients everything they need, which was what needs to be fixed, what to change, what could be better. It was very tactical. We gave them what they needed, and they moved on. But as the years went by, I found that the types of projects and the types of clients and their customers were becoming much more diverse. Lists of things that were broken and needed to be fixed became quite low down on the list compared to more strategic conversations that needed to be had. I went from this UI sort of buttons and screens situation to much more diverse contexts, and being part of people's lives that I knew nothing about, and that often had nothing to do with the screen at all. And through the sort of research work that I was doing, which was sort of like partially a usability approach, but much more discovery, I went from reporting, if you like, on data and logics to inform tactical decisions, to emotion and story and the human side of interacting with products and services, sometimes which hadn't been designed at all. And so I needed a new way to communicate this, because the bullet points and laundry list just wasn't cutting it at all. And I found that new way by going back to some previous careers before usability, with architecture and fine art specifically, which crossed over for me at one time, and each was a kind of antidote to each other. With architecture, your average sort of block of flats type project, you'll have a pile of drawings about this deep. There'll be many, many documents, a lot of detail, specifications, spreadsheets, and as you're working through your pile of drawings, this is a project in Nottingham, you need to be thinking about who is going to read this drawing and what do they need. Some of them are going to price something, some of them are going to put a value on the building, some need to install something, and some need to work out what its impact is going to be on them, and some need to be able to sell the product. But in each case, you need to think about who is it that needs this information, and what are they going to do once they've received that information? What decisions do they need to make? Now with fine art, this is a much more selfish pursuit. It's basically all about me. And it's very personal, and I'm the creator and the audience. My messages to myself were around how I interpreted the world around me and what I saw in the world. Some of these things were quite conceptual and esoteric. They meant a lot to me, and there was sometimes a lot of emotion or personal story and narrative buried in here, but they wouldn't mean much to anyone else unless I was perhaps there to explain. Like this one's called Rubbernecker, and it's about all of the things that race through your mind when you witness an accident on the motorway. So without me to be there, there's not a lot of meaning coming through. That layer of information is missing, but the meaning's there for the right audience. So I had these two worlds, one of data, logic, and facts, the other one of narrative and story. And I thought if I could find this middle ground in between those two, it would be the right medium for my new audience. So I'd like to talk to you about some of these stepping stones from these bullet point reports through to this visual approach that I now take by default. The first one kind of happened by accident, and this was for the BBC. This particular project was around digital media use across any device, and it was pre-smartphone, but there was still plenty of interesting things to learn about who the people were consuming what media at what time, where were they getting it and sharing it, all of the other things you can possibly learn when you throw a diary study out there and then you go in to visit them in their homes and you watch them going about their thing. And the client had asked for, again, not a report, but an ecosystem diagram, which I didn't know what was, and neither did anyone in the agency I worked for, but had a little bit of guidance, and I arrived at this, which has got people's goals and the types of lifestyle aspects where products and services were fitting in and where media was being consumed and what the motivations and outcomes were from all of those different interactions. And the client said, "Nick, you've absolutely nailed it. Oh, wow, look at this. We can base our product roadmap from here because we can see all of the different models of behavior and who are the early adopters and what are they doing. Thank you, thank you, thank you." But I completely disagreed with them, because what I saw was 1,000 words, but no story. Where was the context, and where were all of those people's lives in this ecosystem diagram? So off to the side, I had a flip chart and my pencil, and I got my artist sort of mindset on, and I thought, how does this look to me? And how can I best reflect what I saw in the field and the people that I met and how they behaved? So I had this sort of sketch going on, but knowing that nobody understood my paintings, I needed to add a layer of information which helped them to interpret what did I mean. And knowing the types of decisions that they were wanting to make off the back of it, I added these layers of information. And the client loved this even more, to the point that they actually wanted to take this away immediately, but the director of client services quickly jumped on that and said, we'll need to talk about the commercials because we'll have to hire a graphic designer to render it into this. And I was delighted, and even today I wouldn't have a show of being able to produce something like this at speed like they did. But the real moment that sort of slapped me was 3 years later when I was back and I was introduced as Nick Bowmast, the poster guy. And oh, Nick, come, you gotta come see down here. And so into the sort of kitchen room we go, and there's probably a third or fourth print out of the poster up on the wall, and there's people arguing in front of it. We need to be here, but that's not relevant anymore. And so that really hit me right then. This has got legs, and it's got eyeballs as well, which is what you want the outputs of your project to have. And it's creating conversation. So on another project a bit later, and this time back in New Zealand for a bank, I was tasked with helping the bank understand home buying and what is the journey that people go on. This particular study involved visiting people at different stages or phases of their journey to home ownership. And it got really pretty emotional quite a few times. They'd walk me through this timeline of what they'd experienced and reflect using these emotion cards, the yellow and the blue ones, about how did they feel during each of those steps in the process. And this works really well. And you can see this lady here had a really tough time with all these blue emotion cards here as she was declined finance time and time again. And there were actually tears on the journey map during this session. So as we're approaching share back or the debrief on this project, the client rings me up and says, Nick, so what have we got? What can we look forward to? Can you give us a top 5? And I said, oh, look, Andy, there's this and there's that. But then, there's this kind of concrete mixer sort of funnel thing going on where people going in this end and it's this is that and out they pop. And he said, yeah, good. What are the other 3 or 4 things? And I told him those. And I said, you know what, that funnel thing, I'd really like to just do a sort of a sketch because I think it could help people get on board with what people actually go through. And he said, yeah, bring that along, brilliant. And I did. This is like Sharpie on newsprint, and I sort of let my inner previous artist go, if you like, here, and I really tried to build in all of those emotions in there, which hadn't necessarily been the thing that was asked for, but were very pertinent to the project. And so when we presented video, and then the illustration and the conversation that generated ran right through the end of the allotted time. We didn't go through the report at all. And in the taxi on the way to the airport, the client said, oh, can you just email that through? But could you please tell us where the large format printer is that you use, because we need more copies of that poster. So I at this time knew I was onto something, and now this is the default way I work. So step by step through that process, this is from this ward project. This is the output. I'll very quickly go through the steps that I take. So out we went onto the ward, interviewing people with this terrible plastic bag over the head condition. Hopefully none of you ever afflicted with this. We arrive at our themes, we categorise them to see how do they relate to each other. I'm really racing now because I've just had the 5-minute bell. Then we move on to paper and we shuffle and we argue and we talk about what belongs with what, which flows into what. And then we add the people into the picture. A few speech bubbles, work out what are the most important messages here. And then I do this list of, well, here are all the things that I need to draw. And it's usually a pretty short little list. And so I go through here and I get drawing, and here are all the drawings that are from that picture. And I would suggest if you don't like your drawings, just ask someone, can you draw me this, this, and this? I've done that as well. So then I scan those in and I throw them up on the screen with text blocks, lines, and arrows, and shapes, which are all really, really the basics in any drawing package. And I just move those around until the things that I want to really sing have become prominent and all the different bits of detail are at the level that they need to be. And I print that out as big as I possibly can, and once people have watched a bit of video to understand the context, the conversation with some facilitation begins. And so what we found on this project was that actually patients do prefer to be on a shared ward, which was contrary to what most people would think. We're social beings and we take a lot from being with each other, particularly in those times. So my top tips, you need to be more user-centered. I do, we all do. Understand who it is you're working for, what decisions they need to make based on your outputs. What are they going to do when they've received your information? How can you support them in that? Let form follow insight. Don't go straight in there saying we're going to do a journey map, we're going to do personas, we're going to do an ecosystem diagram. It's going to be what it needs to be to get the job done, to get the information across. So here are just a few different types of thing that have emerged from projects where we didn't always know what we were going to get out the other end. Sometimes it's not linear. Other times it is a bit more linear. Sometimes there's a bit of a cycle within the linear. Sometimes there's a front stage, backstage. This is a retail customer experience project. And there's my old friend, the funnel again. Seems to slip in whenever there's a consumer decision. And here's a day in the life. So quite a narrow focus on a project. And use metaphor when you can. All in a china shop, rabbit in the headlights, storm in a teacup. People get it. They can relate. And they're able to contribute. And they start talking about the ball in the teacup and the china. And that layer of abstraction helps people relate things to their work. So some of the ones I use are things like board games, collecting, hunting, gathering, significant challenges, and pursuits with barriers. Sometimes this factory process, I quite like this one where you get like leakage and process and things like this and flow, and the sort of garden nurture type of metaphor as well. And I often find myself on Google image search typing in things like decision. And you can do the same for frustration or etc., or indecision. And all of a sudden it just serves you up with these fabulous sort of menu of icons and symbols that you could use to tell the story. Lose the detail. Sometimes the most simple bobblehead stick figures work. Arrows are your friends. They do direct people around the information, but they also show what's important and where to look and what relates to what. And if you're thinking about this, these things are also feeding into that, which it's hard to do with bullet points. The voice of the customer needs to be in there. These are real eyeball magnets, speech bubbles, thought bubbles. People just latch onto those. It's not important exactly what the person's wearing, etc. What's said in there, people relate and they remember those things. Make it human scale. It's not a meal for one. This is for multiple people to stand around and discuss And it's in the discussion that the value lies. Allow levels of zoom. So if someone's standing 5-6 feet away, they can read the headlines, but later on, they can get up close and see some of the finer grain detail. Before long, you'll realize you've got a bit of a library going on, and you can recycle, and you'll realize this really quickly when you're drawing the third or fourth person scratching their chin or going like this. Keep it analog as long as you possibly can. It's faster and it's more democratic. Others can join you, shuffle stuff around, contribute, etc. Just don't let the door come open on a windy day. And there's all these other reasons which are well documented, and there's science behind all of this stuff to say this is worth having a crack. And so now it's your turn. And I hope you do have a go. Thank you very much.